All right, I am doing my first ever studio sale. I get a lot of people asking me, Chris, what do you do with all the paintings that we see in these videos? What I do with them, I keep them, and I didn't want to keep them anymore. I wanted them to find a home. So hopefully that will happen with these paintings. Good news is I'm having a sale. Bad news is I'm only probably putting up about like 25 or so paintings. So if you are really interested and you want to get kind of like first shot at getting one of these paintings, sign up for the wait list, which I will put a link to in the description of this video. When you're on the wait list, you'll get access to the sale 24 hours before it gets opened up to the public. And I have no idea how long any of these will stay available. This sale is going to be on the October 13th, but if you're on the wait list, you'll get access on the 12th. So 24 hours before anybody else. And again, the link to that is in the description of this video. All right, let's jump into these and talk a little bit about them. In the past, few years or so, I've been able to kind of like travel some different places and capture some good references to do some cool landscape painting. So this first batch is actually from Virginia, and this one, which you've probably seen before, was actually done in, I think, like late October when the leaves were changing. I was actually able to go up. My cousin's friend of my cousin has like so much acreage in kind of like western Virginia, very rural area, and it was really cold. There was like frost on the ground, so the grass kind of had this very kind of like mint and green looking color. The trees were changing. I specifically went up there to capture the fall trees because I live in Florida and there's just no fall colors down here. But I always just liked how it had a very distinct focal point with the contrast of light and dark, a lot of crisp edges here, and everything else, the edges aren't nearly as strong and crisp as right there. Really like how the shadow of this barn ended up working. These bare trees in the background really giving you that cold feeling, the way the trees look like when they start losing their leaves. I even got some leaves on the ground here. Got that orange color. I really wanted to keep this in here, this like water tank or whatever it was, but I didn't want it to be distracting from the focal point, so I made sure to not push the darks in there as much. But this is one of my favorite paintings. Did a tutorial of it. A lot of people really like this one, so if you want to get the actual original, here it is. All right, sticking in Virginia, this is actually very close to where the last one was. Again, you see the fall colors in the trees, this like the frosty grass, and it was interesting because this barn, like nothing was in there. There was no heat or anything in there. I think it was just storage, but it still had this steam coming off of it. And I remember painting this. It was so cold out there in the morning, and I had my uncle's truck, and I would sit in his trunk and like warm my hands up inside the truck, then come out, pay for about 20 minutes, go back in, pay again for 20 minutes. But always like this one, like the fall colors, like how much these trees dwarf the barn. Got this path leading you to the focal point of this barn, but always fun painting fall colors. Now we are moving to, this is actually kind of like the more northeast. This is on Block Island outside of Connecticut. I actually went up there this past summer, and if I could do a workshop anywhere, it'd probably be Block Island. When I was there, I felt like I could have stayed there for 2 months and done 3 paintings a day and not get bored. But this was like one of the first areas that I took a photo of this. I think it's like a hotel, and there's like this restaurant out here and people outside, and just really liked this foliage and how it just led you back to like the back deck of this restaurant, and just how it was all in shadow, and just really liked the architecture. I kept, I painted it pretty simply because it was in the corner here. I didn't want to get a lot of detail there, kind of keep the viewer's eye going towards this area. Included this driftwood. It's like a arrow to point you in and kind of guide you this way. Also with the rocks, just tried to paint those as simply as I could. And then the umbrellas, all the people at the beach. It was, I think June or July, when I went. So a lot of people outside. Got these little pink flowers that were around there. But I don't know, I just always like the feeling of this, of the kind of the back patio in the shade. In the restaurant, I really would like to go up there and eat. It looks very, very relaxing. All right, we are moving across the country, and this is actually in Sedona, Arizona. One of the coolest trails they had was the West Fork Trail. It's one of the few trails that it's like a lot of woods. You think of Sedona, you think desert, but this one trail had like a lot of trees and foliage. And my fiance and I, we were crossing this stream, and I had to stop and take a bunch of photos because I just liked how it was early in the morning. No one was out there. And, we were standing shaded by all the trees, but outside the trees in the morning sunlight was this big, tall rock face. And I just really liked that warm outside of all this cool and how the reflections in the stream kind of guide you there. I've actually featured this painting in the YouTube video talking about like how to create levels when you have a bunch of trees. Like I had to make the choice to separate this group of trees from these in the distance to create that illusion of distance with the cooler colors and softer edges. But I always just like the feeling of this one. Now, sticking in Arizona, when we were there, we went to the Grand Canyon. It was my first time ever being at the Grand Canyon. And when I first got there, like I felt like my brain couldn't comprehend what my eyes were seeing, how I was able to see, like I don't think I've ever been able to see that much distance. And I really wanted to try and capture that here in a small painting, and utilizing this rock face in the foreground and keeping it a lot warmer than the rest of this, I feel like helped a lot. Just keeping things cooler, painting them more simply, less shapes as you get further back here. I liked how this was being shadowed by a cloud. It's kind of like this big dark shape, and this kind of points you here. It's the focal point of the two people here. It's me and my fiance, but it can be anybody you want if it's your painting. And the river here kind of added that in. It's like a little light to kind of contrast this big light shape with a smaller light shape there, and kind of give you a reason for your eye to move back into here. But I was just really proud of the amount of depth I was able to capture in such a small painting, and painted so simply, and keeping all this simple, even though like in the photo you could see a ton of detail. Like I don't want the detail. Like I want to be able to communicate this very simply with using the right values and the right color temperatures. Now going a little more north, this is Jackson, Wyoming. One of the first places I stopped to paint. We're at these barns. I forget what they're called. Like they're the famous barns you always see in photos. But this is like the Tetons in the back. And I just really liked the scene. I liked having the shadow in the grass, and also with the path and just the dappled light that was happening, how this brings you to the focal point of the barn there. I kind of pushed this tree a little to the right and made it so it pretty much just acts like a stopper to keep you from going off the corner. It brings you back in. The main focal point here, kind of kept more detail in the front of the grass, kept it very simple here. It gets a lot cooler as you get further back here, a lot more simpler with the mountains, but really want to get back there and paint pretty soon. But always like this one, and just like the feeling that it gives me of being back there and just being just in awe of the mountains, and just like everywhere you turned there was a painting. Speaking of which, staying in Jackson, Wyoming, there was this one area, I don't know if I was like trespassing or not, like I'd pull off the side of the road and there was this stream in this barn, and I just go there and take pictures like all different times of day, in the morning, in the afternoon, and this was in the evening at sunset. And I'm just so glad I got it with just the sunset colors and this stream that worked back and just got the focal point there, the bright part of the sunrise being reflected there. It's whenever you have reflections, it's mirrored. So, down the horizon, the sky, it's the yellow, and it gets cooler as it goes up. It's the opposite with the water here, and just great lead in to the painting here. Still get the barn. These are actually the Tetons in the distance, but always just really like this one. And I'm thinking about painting like a more afternoon version of this, but this was like one of my favorite scenes that I kept like coming back to and taking photos when I took my trip to Jackson. Now when I first got to Jackson, Wyoming, I got out of the airport, went to my lodge, and immediately went here. And this is kind of near where those barns are. But when I was there was these yellow flowers in these fields. It was so cool. I remember when I first started learning to paint, I would look at landscape painters who could handle painting a field really well. And I always liked it because I was like, man, like field seems so hard. It's just all a bunch of grass. It's all the same. Like, how do you distinguish it and create depth and distance? One of the keys is just like keeping more detail up front, more vibrant colors, more darks. As you get further back into the distance of this field, you can see like the flowers, they get softer. They're not as defined. Shapes are bigger. The greens are cooler. Same with the mountains here. Got cooler shapes with the mountains. It's a backlit scene. So on these trees, it's kind of like when trees are backlit, it's the light kind of coming on the rim of them. So that's always fun to do. I feel like pretty easy to communicate that. But I always like this one. I love painting flowers in a field, and just the flowers, they were absolutely incredible. They were so good. There was the Tetons right here, but these were so interesting to me that I was like willing to ignore the Tetons and just have them be a background element in this painting. Now we are coming to Florida, and one of the coolest places near me is the Cortez Fishing Village. And it's like a real dock where fishing boats come to process their catches. And that's like what this is, like the conveyor belt. And just all these really interesting boats and the dock and just so much character. It's like the real thing. So real. It's pretty smelly over there with all the fish and everything. But I just always liked just the color of the water. We got this really turquoise water down here in Sarasota. Like the boats, all the different shapes and lights, darks. Wanted to keep this fishing boat back here, but still have it sit in the distance. So kept the contrast very subtle, not a lot of dark darks or light lights back there. Liked this element, really good directional, pointing to the focal point of the boat. And just really wanted to kind of capture that warmth, that summer feeling out on the water here down in Florida. And just love all the colors that are in the reflections here that you can get in this water. But I always love going back there and painting. I'm going there all the time. Now, this is actually pretty close to Cortez. This is at a sandbar I go to a lot with my dad on his boat. And this is actually an island. It's a small island. It's probably not even a mile long. And there's always like big houses on it. And this one in particular I always thought was really cool. It's a very tropical looking house. And I remember when I took the photo for this, there was all these grasses underneath the water, seaweed, and it was just making these really interesting dark shapes that I knew, I can kind of choreograph those to lead you in and balance out the composition, lead you to the focal point here. It just had a lot of fun painting the water and the reflections. The blue is just the sky reflected. It's like the last thing that I put on. Utilizing a lot of soft edges, letting a lot of wet and wet paint happen into here, keeping these bright areas, like really bright light green, yellowish areas just up front, kind of leading you into the painting and bringing you to the focal point there. It's like, you're like, when I took this, I was standing in the water on the sandbar. I'm just always going back here. I always wanted to do a video where I do a plein air painting actually on the sandbar and get out my paints and everything. I think that would be fun. Now, one of my favorite places to paint, probably the place I've painted the most in Florida, is Lido Beach State Park. It's just past Lido Beach, and it's this park with a lot of trees that are on the water, and there's these paths that you can walk through. And I think like in around February, March, all these pine needles, the red pine needles, fall on the white sand. And I just loved just the color combinations that you get and the warmth in the sand here with the pine needles and shadow and light and the white sand, turquoise water. You got the dark tree. I think these are pine needles up top. And just the idea of kind of like you're back in the woods in the shade, looking out to the bright crystal blue greenish water out there in the sun. I got a bench. That bench is actually really there, just kind of like a hidden spot here in Sarasota. I feel like not too many people know about it. And if like you keep walking down that way, you get to like another kind of hidden beach area where a lot of kayakers go, which I actually have a painting coming up here soon that will show that. But did this painting a few years ago, and it's just always one of my favorites. Very rare that I do a painting like I look at a painting that I did years and years ago and I don't see a bunch of things that bother me, but this one, I don't know, it holds up really well for me. Now this one, there's like a park at the base of the Skyway Bridge, and I went there to paint and just loved this scene and just loved, these dark shapes, you're seeing them through the water, help bring you into the painting, and then strategically placing these rocks to guide you through to the focal point here. The person on the beach, same with this cloud, brings you in, this way. We have like all this energy coming from the right to the left. I wanted something from left to right. Using soft edges, create this reflection in the water. The closer you get to the viewer here, the foreground, the more you can see down into the water to the sand. Where the further you go back, the more the reflection of the sky that you're getting. Very simple painting, but just felt like the composition works really, really well with this one. Now, what I was saying before about the beach where the kayakers would go, that's what this is from. And so I painted there a lot. There's like, it's all these, like kind of like a maze of mangroves that the kayak tours go through, and I'll be painting there. And people will come up and they park their kayaks and kind of take a break and, find shells in the water here. And a lot of times I feel like I'm a part of the tour. People like looking at me and looking at this guy painting, taking photos as if I'm just like another, like bird or dolphin or something they see along the tour. But just love the composition of this one, of this one dark shape here with the very bright, saturated contrast of the kayaks. Whenever I'm painting beach scenes out here in Florida and kayaks come up, it's like almost impossible for me not to include the kayak because it's just such a good, bright spot to kind of create a focal point. And just love that the grass is here. Just everything leads you to this focal point. Again, with soft edges in the water here, kind of creating that fluid look. Backlit too, it's why it's kind of just the top rim of these mangroves lit up. But I always like it when I can paint a very simple scene and it turns out really well. This means like the composition is working really well. Now going up a little north to St. Pete, it's about 40 minutes where I'm from. That's where this scene is. It's the only nocturnal scene I think I have. And this is actually right outside. When I first started dating my fiance, she lived in St. Pete, and I'd have to travel 40 minutes to see her. And one night we were walking, there had just been a rain, and this restaurant, Hawkers, was like right across from where she lived. And I had to stop and take a bunch of photos because I just knew it would make a good painting, like utilizing the directional, this crosswalk, and everything's kind of pointing you to this area where I put us actually with our little Chihuahua Coco as the focal point. And it's always fun to just establish the darks and then go in with areas that are lit up, like inside this window in this restaurant or the hawker sign, and then also reflecting it down into the water was also really fun. And just utilizing wet into wet paint to get the fluid nature of the water here on the street was really fun. Nocturnal paintings are always really, really fun. I was always extremely happy with the way this one turned out. All right, now we're going to California. I took a trip there it was like a year ago now, last October, and me and my fiance, we went to San Francisco and took a tour. And I was like, I got to get photos of the Golden Gate Bridge. I really want to paint the Golden Gate Bridge. And painting this, it was a great exercise in simplifying because, I could see all the different bars and railings and wires and everything. But just the further I got away, leaving them out, this is all painted very simply, not a whole lot of shapes. Whereas here, I kind of took advantage of more shapes. Still had to leave a lot out, but also just kept the contrast really high. In person, you can probably tell better, but just a lot thicker paint. Just really, wanted to establish this, make this seem very strong and sturdy. Simplified a lot of this, just thinking about the light. This right side of this rectangular post is getting more light than this side right here. Simplified this mountain a lot. Took out a lot of shapes because I needed to sit in distance. Softened a lot of edges. Just took out a lot of detail back there. Also, just made sure to include these white cap waves because it's very windy and very choppy water there, and I really wanted to communicate that. And I was just really happy with the way this turned out. I haven't painted much subject matter like this, bridges and architecture like that, and I was really happy with the way this one came out. Now, we were actually almost late to that tour, and this was taken while we were driving. We first got to San Francisco, and it was like early in the morning. Our tour bus was actually like right down there. I was like, wait. And like I handed my phone to my fiance. I was like, take a photo of this. This is make good painting. It's like looking down this street, and the sunlight was coming from the right, so it was like shining through the crossing streets here, and just really liked how everything was in shadow. Whenever doing cityscape paintings, I feel like so much of it is just simplifying everything and just understanding where the light's coming from. Like this building here, just having these two different colors and values creates the form of this building. And there's a ton of windows and ledges and stuff on this building. Had to leave it out, left a lot out. Just really wanted to get the overall scene. It's actually Alcatraz right there. We went there. That was really fun. Just really like the depth in this scene. San Francisco, one of those cities that just has so much depth that you can see the streets like so far because you're either up on the hill or down looking up at the hills, and just lends itself to really cool cityscape paintings. All right, and this next one is actually in Pebble Beach. I was in California for a workshop with Brian Blood, and one of the first places we painted was here on Pebble Beach, and I just felt like it was one of those rare scenes where everything, I didn't have to change much for it to work. This beach house acting as a great focal point, this light against this dark, and just this path leading you there. And it was fun to simplify all these bushes. There's just, tons of detail and tons of different colors, but just kind of choosing one color, just getting the main form of it and keeping it simple. Same with back here. There's a whole lot going on back here, but just keeping it simple. It's a background element. Same with all these rocks, tons of rocks here, but just putting in what I need to communicate those rocks as simply as I could. This is one of the paintings I'm like most proud of in terms of simplification and leaving stuff out. Like you wouldn't know it just by looking at the painting. I've actually made a YouTube video about this painting, and seeing the photo that's from, just the amount of simplification that had to be done for this was big step for me, and really, really proud of this painting here. Now going a little more south down to Laguna Beach is this one here. Laguna Beach it's really fun to paint because there's so many houses on these cliffs. I mean, one, there's like hills and mountains and cliffs on the ocean, which, me being in Florida, you just don't see. So it's always fun to paint. I lived in California for 11 years, and that's when I took this photo. It was like probably back in 2018 or 19. But I just loved how much distance was communicated in this. Up front, you got these rocks. You can see down the water in the shallows here, where it's a lot warmer and a lot greener. You got the beach here. You got the people on the beach. You got this first kind of hill of houses. I wanted this to be the focal point. That's why I painted this one a little sharper. A lot of the other ones I kind of didn't make as bright. Had them be a little bit softer. And then back here, even more mountains. And even back here, even more mountains with houses just covering them. It's just really, really unique place, and definitely want to get back there and paint some. There's a plein air festival that's there every year that I actually went to. I didn't participate. I just went to watch, and seeing some of the painters that paint there was really, really fun. That was, I think that was like 2017 or 2018. That was a while ago, but Laguna Beach, great place. Really, always really was, painting these houses and everything. That's something that I feel like when I was like in my early 20s, if I tried to paint, I would just have no idea what to do. And I just kind of look at this, I'm like, wow, like I'm surprised I can paint that now. That's, I don't know, makes me happy to think about. All right, and the last one here, another Los Angeles one. I remember back when I was living there, I always wanted to do a series of paintings of cowboys in Los Angeles, just like the contrast of subject matter. And this one here is from a photo I took in like East LA around sunset. Like Hollywood would be like kind of like in the distance over here, but just a lot of atmosphere with these hills, like especially when they're backlit like this, and just the cool shapes for the buildings, and really, really fun to paint. And whole foreground and shadow here, looking out to the background and the light. Just added the cowboy, and he really wasn't there on the horse. Painting these cars were fun, just knowing that the tops are going to be just the sky reflected down into them, and painting them just enough to know what they are, but not too detailed that they're distracting. Really, this one for a Patreon tutorial. A lot of people like this one a lot. All right, now that's not all the paintings. There are a few others that I'll be putting on the sale. These two behind me will also be there with a couple other bigger paintings like 16 by 20 or 18 by 24 if you're interested in any big ones. Really excited to do this. Really like the idea of my work getting out there, not just being hoarded here with me. Again, if you want to get on the wait list to get first access to these, you can do that by signing up through the link in the description of this video. All right, I'm Chris Fornatero, here telling you to go get painting.